The transition should not have been possible. Setsuna F. Seiei had piloted Gundam Exia through 4 years of armed interventions, through atmospheric re-entry that turned the sky white with friction, through particle beam barrages that would have vaporized lesser machines. He knew the feel of his machine like he knew his own heartbeat. Every vibration through the control sphere, every flicker of data across his neural interface, every microscopic adjustment of the GN drive's output registered in his consciousness with perfect clarity. This was different. The distortion had appeared without warning during what should have been a routine patrol of Lagrange Point 3. One moment, the infinite black of space stretched before him, stars fixed in their eternal positions. The next reality folded. The phenomenon defied every physical law celestial being scientists had documented. Space itself seemed to tear not along any geometric plane, but through dimensions that human perception could not properly process. The visual cortex struggled to interpret what the eyes witnessed. Colors that had no name in any language bled from the wound in space. Shapes twisted through angles that could not exist in three-dimensional reality. Exia's sensors screamed warnings across every spectrum. Gravitational readings spiked to impossible values, then inverted. Electromagnetic fields pulsed in patterns that suggested intelligence, malevolence, hunger. The GN drive, humanity's most advanced technological achievement, cycled through output fluctuations that should have torn the mobile suit apart at the molecular level. Setsuna's hands moved across the control sphere with practiced precision. He diverted emergency power to the GN field, wrapping Exia in a cocoon of particle saturation. The Emerald Barrier had deflected railgun slugs traveling at relativistic speeds. It had absorbed beam weapon fire hot enough to boil tungsten. Against this, it held for exactly 3 seconds. The barrier shattered like glass. Reality inverted. Exia tumbled through a space that was not space, through a medium that burned with colors drawn from nightmares. Setsuna felt the phenomenon through his neural link, felt it as pressure against his mind itself. Thoughts that were not his own, pressed at the edges of consciousness. Whispers in languages that predated human speech promised power, knowledge, transformation. He shut them out through discipline learned in cockpits and battlefields. His mind became a single point of focused intention. He was Gundam. Gundam did not yield to external corruption. Gundam existed to cut through falsehood and return the world to clarity. The GN drive stuttered. For the first time since its creation, the semi-perpetual motion engine faltered. Green particles that should have flowed in perfect helical patterns scattered like frightened birds. Exia's systems began cascading failures. Environmental controls targeting computers, communication arrays all dropping offline in rapid succession. Setsuna activated the emergency stasis protocol. If he could not control the descent, he could at minimum ensure survival. Gel foam flooded the cockpit, cushioning his body against forces that would pulp unprotected human tissue. Neural safeguards disengaged, severing the mind-machine link before feedback could cause permanent brain damage. His last conscious action was to route all remaining power to structural integrity. Then the universe screamed. The sensation of falling persisted, even as consciousness faded, not falling through space, but falling through reality itself, tumbling down through layers of existence like a stone, dropping through water, oil, mercury, liquid metal things that had no comparison in the physical world. Each layer burned differently. Each transition felt like dying and being reborn in the span of a microsecond. Exia struck atmosphere at an angle that should have been impossible for an object emerging from non-Euclidean space. The mobile suit's ablative armor began immediate vaporization. Fragments of Gundanium alloy the hardest metal humanity had ever synthesized, burned away like tissue paper in a furnace. The GN drive cycled through emergency restart sequences, coughing fitful bursts of green light. Below, a world turned. It was not Earth. The continental configurations held no resemblance to the blue marble Setsuna had sworn to protect. 3 moons hung in the sky, their surfaces pocked with craters that suggested ancient bombardment. 1 moon showed signs of industrial development, massive structures visible even from orbital altitude. The planet itself bore scars regions where the landmass had been strip-mined to bedrock continents, showing geometric patterns that spoke of construction on planetary scales. Exia's descent took it over 1 such region. What might have once been an ocean had been filled with rockcrete transformed into a landing field that stretched beyond the horizon. Gothic architecture thrust upward in defiance of engineering sanity. Spires kilometers tall, buttressed with flying arches wide enough to land spacecraft through. Statues the size of mountains depicting armored warriors with expressions of eternal fury. The mobile suit's failing sensors detected active scanning. Dozens of sources, hundreds, maybe thousands, all focusing on the falling machine. Defense batteries tracked its trajectory. Massive weapons that could core battleships swiveled in their mountings. Somewhere in the sea of data corruption, Setsuna registered weapons lock. They did not fire. Perhaps they recognized Exia as already dying. Perhaps the angles were wrong for the massive guns designed for orbital bombardment. Perhaps some other calculation stayed their fire. The mobile suit fell past the engagement envelope, plummeting toward the surface at terminal velocity. Setsuna regained partial consciousness during the final descent. The neural link flickered back online in emergency mode, feeding him fragmented data. Altitude decreasing. Structural integrity at 23%. GN drive output irregular but functional. External temperature beyond measurement scale. He had perhaps 10 seconds. Training took over. His hands found controls by muscle memory, activating thrusters that coughed and misfired. Exia could not achieve controlled flight, but it could adjust trajectory, could alter the angle of impact from instantly fatal to merely catastrophic. The mobile suit struck Earth in a region distant from the massive city. Barren rock stretched in all directions, broken only by scattered ruins that might have been habitation before whatever catastrophe had scoured the land. Exia hit at an angle, skipped like a stone on water, tumbled through 3 rotations that tore away the remaining armor plating. The GN drive shut down completely. Emergency batteries took over, providing just enough power to prevent total system death. Exia came to rest in a crater of its own making, half buried in pulverized rock systems, dark, barely recognizable as a machine that had once been humanity's most advanced weapon. Silence settled over the crash site. Dust thrown up by the impact drifted back down through air that tasted of metal and ash. Nothing moved for long minutes. Then slowly, Exia's head camera activated. A single lens glowed with faint green light, surveying the desolation. In the cockpit, cushioned by now draining gel foam, Setsuna F. Seye opened his eyes and began the process of survival. He ran diagnostics through the emergency interface. The results painted a portrait of comprehensive destruction. Main power offline. Weapon systems unresponsive. Thrusters damaged beyond field repair. The GN drive itself registered as functional, but locked in some kind of safety shutdown, refusing to restart without full diagnostic clearance. Communications returned nothing but static across all frequencies. No response from Ptolemaios, no contact with celestial being. Not even the background chatter of commercial satellites that should have been omnipresent in any developed system. Setsuna unsealed the cockpit. Mechanical systems designed to function even in total power loss responded to manual override. The hatch cracked open with a hiss of equalizing pressure, and air from outside rushed in. It smelled wrong. Not toxic, the suit's atmospheric analyzer confirmed breathability, but wrong in ways that bypassed rational analysis. Like standing downwind of a foundry mixed with ozone, and something organic that had been burning for a very long time. He pulled himself from the cockpit muscles, protesting. The neural interface left echoes, phantom sensations of damage that was not his body's, but his machine's. The sky above showed the wrong color, more purple than blue, and the 3 moons hung visible even in daylight. Exia stood half-buried, its white armor scorched black. One arm twisted at an impossible angle. The GN blade had been torn away during descent. The GN sword remained in its mount, but looked warped, possibly unusable. Still, the mobile suit stood. Damaged, crippled, but not destroyed. Setsuna's combat assessment began automatically. Immediate threats unknown. Survival necessities, shelter, water information. Long-term priorities, repair. Exia establish communication, determine location. The rational part of his mind knew that last goal might be impossible. He had fallen through something that physics could not explain, emerged in a place where 3 moons hung in a purple sky above ruins that stretched to the horizon. This was not his world, possibly not his universe, but he was Gundam, and Gundam did not despair. He began the walk toward the distant ruins, one hand on the sidearm that had somehow survived the crash. Behind him, Exia stood silent in its crater, a monument to impossible arrival. Ahead in the ruins of a world he did not know, Setsuna F. Seiye took his first steps toward a war he could not yet imagine. The ruins had been a city once. Setsuna moved through streets where buildings leaned against each other like exhausted soldiers. Rockcrete walls bore scorch marks from weapons fire patterns, suggesting sustained combat rather than single strikes. Windows gaped empty, their contents long since scavenged or destroyed. In some structures, he found evidence of habitation cooking fires, cold for months, sleeping spaces marked by compressed debris, primitive tools abandoned mid-task. The people had left in a hurry, or been driven out. His survival training cataloged resources automatically. A collapsed warehouse held containers of dried grain, edible, if not appetizing. A fractured water main still trickled the liquid testing clean enough after filtration through his suit's emergency systems. Most valuable, a largely intact administrative building where corroded data terminals suggested this had been a mining settlement population approximately 15,000. Past tense. The streets held no bodies, but the silence carried weight. Setsuna established a temporary shelter in the administrative building's sublevel, a space that offered concealment and structural integrity. His first priority remained Exia. Without the mobile suit operational, he was simply a man with a pistol on a world that had demonstrated its hostility through desolation alone. But repair required tools, materials, expertise that seemed absent from this gutted settlement. The sound reached him on the 3rd day. Not the wind whistling through broken windows. Not the settling of damaged structures. This was rhythmic, mechanical, purposeful. Engines, multiple sources approaching from the east. Setsuna moved to an upper-floor observation point, staying back from the window, using a shard of reflective metal to observe without exposing his position. The vehicles that entered the ruins matched nothing in his tactical database. They moved on treads wide enough to crush a car, their armor plating thick enough to stop anti-tank rounds. But the design language spoke of something beyond mere military function. Every surface bore religious iconography, skulls, eagles with 2 heads inscriptions in a language Setsuna did not recognize. The vehicle's architecture suggested Gothic cathedrals redesigned for war, all flying buttresses and vaulted armor plating. 20 vehicles in total. Troop transports, he assessed, though scaled larger than any APC Earth's militaries fielded. They moved in textbook formation outer elements, providing cover for the central column spacing, optimized to prevent a single strike from eliminating multiple units. The transports stopped in the settlement's central square. Assault ramps dropped with hydraulic precision, and warriors emerged. They stood taller than any human Setsuna had encountered. 2 meters, perhaps more, their bulk exaggerated by armor that looked less like protective gear and more like portable fortresses. Deep blue ceramite plates, each piece inscribed with script and symbols. Helmets that resembled stylized skulls, eye lenses glowing red in the shadow of the ruins. They carried weapons sized for their massive frames rifles that would require a normal human to brace against the ground chainswords with teeth longer than combat knives. 30 warriors. They spread through the ruins, with practiced efficiency moving in combat pairs, weapons ready but not raised to firing position. Searching, but not yet engaged with a known target. One warrior stood apart from the others. His armor bore additional ornamentation. Purity seals dangling from shoulder guards, a cloak of deep crimson hanging from his back. When he spoke, his voice carried across the ruins with unnatural clarity, amplified by the armor's Vox systems. "This is Sergeant Thorne of the Consecrator's 5th Company. We detected an unidentified atmospheric entry 3 days prior. Orbital augers track the impact site to this region. If survivors are present, identify yourselves. We offer the Emperor's protection to loyal servants of the Imperium." The words meant nothing to Setsuna. The language was familiar in structure, low Gothic. His suit's translator attempted confidence level 43%, but the context remained opaque. Emperor, Imperium, consecrators, terms without reference. He remained still observing. The warriors continued their search, moving with precision that spoke of centuries of military tradition. They cleared buildings methodically, 2-man teams covering each other's angles. When they found the warehouse with the grain, one warrior made notation on a data slate. When they discovered the water source, another marked it with a small beacon. Resource cataloging. They intended to return. The sergeant stood in the square, his helmeted head turning slowly, as if sensing something beyond normal perception. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted. Still formal, but with an edge of tension. "We know you are here. The impact signature indicates a single vessel, small craft, possibly Xeno's origin. Exiting the warp without Geller field protection suggests either desperation or ignorance. Either way, you survived. That suggests capability." He paused. "The Imperium has use for capable survivors. Show yourself." Setsuna weighed options. Remaining hidden was temporary at best. These warriors had technology organization, clear military doctrine. They would find him eventually, better to control the circumstances of contact than to be discovered in a position of weakness. He stood moving to the window where afternoon light would silhouette him. Raised both hands, palms forward, the universal gesture of non-aggression. Then stepped through the broken window frame onto the building's external fire escape. The response was immediate. 30 weapons snapped to aim at his position, targeting lasers painting red dots across his chest. The warriors moved into firing positions with speed that seemed impossible for beings their size. In less than 2 seconds, Setsuna stood in the overlapping kill zones of an entire squad. He did not move, did not lower his hands, simply stood waiting. The sergeant raised one armored fist. The warriors held fire, but weapons remained trained. He approached the building alone, moving with the confidence of a being that had never encountered a threat it could not eliminate. Up close, the true scale became apparent. The sergeant stood perhaps 2.5 meters tall, his armor adding additional bulk. Setsuna, not a small man, would barely reach the warrior's shoulder. "You are human." The sergeant's tone carried surprise. "Unaugmented, unarmored, yet you survived warp transit and atmospheric entry." Red eye lenses studied him with unblinking intensity. "Impossible." "I am Setsuna F. Seiei." He kept his voice level, projecting calm he did not entirely feel. "Gundam Meister of celestial being. My mobile suit suffered catastrophic failure during an unexplained spatial phenomenon. I mean no harm to you or your people." The sergeant tilted his head slightly. "Your words are low Gothic, but the accent is wrong. Ancient, perhaps. And your terms carry no meaning. Gundam, celestial being. These are not registered Imperial organizations." He gestured, and 2 warriors moved forward, weapons still raised. "You will submit to restraint and questioning. Resistance will be met with termination." Setsuna calculated odds. Against one of these warriors, perhaps a 5% chance through surprise and superior speed. Against 30 with overlapping fields of fire, 0%. He lowered his hands, slowly turning to present his back fingers, lacing behind his head, in the standard compliance position. One warrior approached, producing restraints that looked designed for baseline humans. Metal bands clicked around Setsuna's wrists with uncomfortable tightness. A second warrior performed a weapons check, removing the pistol from its holster with surprising gentleness. "A stub weapon." The warrior examining the pistol sounded almost amused. "Primitive but well-maintained. Chemical propellant kinetic projectiles." He handed it to the sergeant. "No tech heresy evident. Simple mechanical function." The sergeant studied the weapon briefly, then mag-locked it to his belt. "You said mobile suit. Define." "A piloted combat machine, 15 meters tall, armed with beam weaponry and close combat blades. Powered by a GN drive, a semi-perpetual motion engine that generates exotic particles." Setsuna kept his voice factual, reporting rather than explaining. "It crashed approximately 3 kilometers west of this position." The sergeant's posture shifted. "You claim to pilot a war machine, one that survived warp exposure." He activated his Vox. "Command, this is Thorn. The survivor claims operation of a combat construct, designation unknown impact site 3 clicks west. Requesting tech marine support and auger sweep of the identified coordinates." Static, then a voice crackling through. "Acknowledged, Sergeant. Brother Hadrian is en route with survey equipment. ETA 20 minutes. Emperor protects." "Emperor protects," the sergeant responded. He turned back to Setsuna. "You will guide us to this machine. If you speak truth, the tech marine will determine its nature and potential. If you lie..." He left the threat unspoken. They moved through the ruins in formation Setsuna, in the center, surrounded by warriors who maintained tactical spacing even during what was essentially prisoner transport. He noted details, the way their armor servo motors hummed at frequencies just below normal. Hearing the casual readiness with which they held weapons that must weigh 50 kilograms, the constant Vox chatter in a language his translator could not crack. These were not normal soldiers. Enhanced, augmented, possibly genetically modified. Their movements suggested strength far beyond human baseline. Their discipline spoke of training measured in decades, not years. The crash site came into view. Exia stood where Setsuna had left it, half-buried, damaged, but intact. In the 3 days since landing, wind had scoured away some of the dust, revealing more of the mobile suit's form. White armor scorched black, The distinctive head design with its single camera eye. One arm extended as if reaching toward the sky, the other crumpled against its torso. The warriors stopped. Weapons raised again, but this time aimed at Exia rather than Setsuna. The sergeant moved forward slowly, circling the mobile suit at a distance of 50 meters, studying it from all angles. "It is no design I recognize." His voice carried uncertainty for the first time. "Not Tau, not Eldar, certainly not Necron." He approached closer, reaching out to touch the scorched armor plating. "But it is a machine, built with purpose. The damage suggests atmospheric entry without proper shielding, and yet the core structure remains intact. What manner of material is this Gundanium alloy?" Setsuna watched the sergeant examine his mobile suit with something approaching reverence. Synthesized metal stronger than steel, lighter than aluminum. The armor is designed to withstand beam weapons and kinetic impacts. "And this GN drive you mentioned? Where is it housed?" "Central torso. The unit generates particles that provide propulsion weapons power and defensive barriers." The sergeant stepped back. "A machine that generates its own power, that creates defensive fields, that survive the warp." He turned to Setsuna, and though the helmet hid his expression, his tone carried weight. "You understand what you are describing is heresy. The creation of thinking machines of abominable intelligence is the highest crime against the Emperor and all humanity. Exia does not think." Setsuna met the hidden gaze steadily. "It responds to pilot input through neural interface. I am the intelligence. The machine is simply the tool through which I act." "You claim direct neural connection to this construct?" "Yes. That is also heresy. The flesh is weak, but to merge it with the machine without the blessing of the Omnissiah, without proper ritual and sanctification." The sergeant trailed off. "You are either ignorant of the Imperium's laws, or you come from beyond its reach. Either possibility is troubling." A new vehicle approached, smaller than the troop transports, its armor painted red rather than blue. It stopped, and a single figure emerged. This warrior's armor bore different markings. A cogwheel symbol prominent on the shoulder guard, mechanical appendages extending from the backpack like the arms of a spider. He carried tools rather than weapons, their purposes unclear, but clearly specialized. "Brother Hadrian?" The sergeant gestured toward Exia. "The prisoner claims this is a piloted war construct. I require your expertise." The tech marine approached the mobile suit with the careful attention of a surgeon examining a patient. He produced a scanning device, playing it across Exia's surface, reading data that scrolled across his helmet's display. For 5 minutes, he worked in silence. Then he turned, and when he spoke, his voice carried the modulated tones of someone accustomed to speaking with machines as much as with men. "This is no work of the Adeptus Mechanicus. The construction principles are foreign, but Sergeant Thorne's assessment is correct. This survived warp exposure. The residual energies are unmistakable." He gestured to the GN drive housing. "Something in the central cavity generates a field that dampened the Imperium's touch. Not a Geller field, but similar in function. Remarkable, and deeply concerning." "Your recommendation?" the sergeant asked. "The prisoner speaks truth. This is a piloted vehicle. The neural interface architecture is primitive but functional. No evidence of abominable intelligence. However," he paused, "the power generation system defies several principles of thermodynamics. It should not function. Yet clearly it did. This requires extensive study. I recommend transport to the strike cruiser for detailed analysis." The sergeant nodded. "Agreed." Have your servitors bring heavy lift equipment. We will transport both the prisoner and his machine to orbit." He turned to Setsuna. "You will cooperate fully with Tech Marine Hadrian's investigation. If your machine is found to contain no taint of chaos or Xeno's corruption, you may be permitted to live. If not..." Again, the unspoken threat. Setsuna stood in the shadow of his damaged mobile suit, surrounded by warriors from a civilization he did not understand, facing investigation by standards he had never encountered. But Exia remained. Damaged, dormant, but intact. Where the mobile suit existed, possibility remained. "I will cooperate," he said. The sergeant gestured, and two warriors moved to stand guard. The Tech Marine began his preparations, already voxing requests for specialized equipment. As the sun set on this world, with 3 moons casting purple light across the ruins, Setsuna F. Seye faced his first true contact with the Imperium of man. He had survived warp transit, survived atmospheric entry, survived first contact with warriors who could kill him with casual ease. Now came the harder trial, convincing them that Gundam was not heresy. The strike cruiser hung in orbit like a cathedral that had forgotten it was supposed to stay planet-bound. Setsuna stood in the observation gallery, restraint still locked around his wrists, watching as the planet rotated below. From this altitude, the scars became more obvious. Entire continents stripped to bedrock. Oceans thick with industrial runoff that showed as rust-colored swirls against murky green. The 3 moons maintained their vigil, the largest, showing clear signs of mining operations that had carved away perhaps a third of its mass. Behind him, through reinforced blast doors, Tech Marine Hadrian supervised the unloading of Exia. The mobile suit had been transported via heavy cargo lifter, secured in a magnetic harness designed for moving artillery pieces. Setsuna had watched the operation with professional detachment, noting how the Astartes handled his machine with surprising care, despite considering it potential heresy. 2 warriors stood guard in the observation gallery. They had not moved in the 3 hours since Setsuna had been stationed here. Did not shift their weight, did not adjust their grips on their weapons, barely seemed to breathe. Their discipline went beyond human endurance into something else entirely. The door cycled open. Sergeant Thorne entered, helmet mag locked to his belt, revealing features that matched his voice. Hard angles, skin weathered by time, and combat eyes that had witnessed things Setsuna could not imagine. He gestured for the guards to step outside. They obeyed without hesitation, closing the door behind them. "You have been cooperative." Thorne moved to the observation window, standing beside Setsuna rather than behind him. A subtle gesture of reduced threat assessment. "Tech Marine Hadrian reports your machine contains no warp taint, no Xenos technology, no abominable intelligence. It is, as you claimed, simply a sophisticated tool awaiting a skilled operator." "Then I am free to go." "No." Thorne's response came flat and immediate. "You are an unknown variable. Your machine's power source violates established physics. Your arrival through the warp without protection should have killed you, or worse. And your ignorance of the Imperium suggests origins beyond our mapped territories." He turned to face Setsuna directly. "The chapter master has authorized a proposal. You will serve the consecrators as auxiliary support. You will use your machine in combat operations against the Emperor's enemies. In exchange, we provide resources for repair and maintenance, and you remain alive and uncorrupted. I am not a soldier for hire. You are not being hired. You are being conscripted." Thorne's voice carried no anger, simply stating fact. "The alternative is summary execution. You possess technology we cannot permit to fall into enemy hands, and knowledge of the Imperium we cannot allow to spread to potential enemies. Service or death. Choose. Setsuna studied the sergeant's face, saw no deception there, no bluff. This was a man accustomed to making life and death decisions with the same calculation others used to choose breakfast. The Imperium operated on logic utterly alien to celestial beings' mission. No armed interventions to end conflict. Only endless war against designated enemies. Yet refusal meant death, and death meant Exia would be dismantled, studied, possibly destroyed. The mobile suit represented humanity's achievement proof that people could reach beyond their limitations through will and engineering. Letting it end here served nothing. What enemies, Gessus? Nemme, he asked. Currently, planetary defense forces on the world below have ceased responding to Imperial command. Vox transmissions are garbled, filled with cant that suggests chaos corruption. The governor has gone silent. Orbital augury detects military buildup in the southern continent's capital region. Thorn pulled up a hololithic display showing the planet's surface with tactical overlays. Fifth Company was en route to another engagement when we detected your arrival. Command has diverted us to investigate what should be a minor compliance action. 7,000 PDF troops against 30 Astartes. He smiled without humor. Hardly a fair fight. You want me to participate in an invasion? I want you to prove your machine's worth. And I want to observe how you fight. Combat reveals character more clearly than any interrogation. Thorn gestured, and the display zoomed to show the settlement where Setsuna had crashed. This mining colony, abandoned 3 months ago. Refugees reported strange dreams, visions, voices from below. Classic signs of warp corruption. The PDF was supposed to contain the outbreak. Instead, they appear to have embraced it. Setsuna looked at the tactical data, recognized patterns from his own military experience, fortified positions, supply lines, command structures, but overlaid with symbols that meant nothing to him. 8-pointed stars, inscriptions in the same language he had seen on the Space Marine armor, references to entities with names like titles of nobility. What is chaos? The question emerged before he could reconsider its wisdom. Thorn's expression shifted. Not anger, but something closer to pity. You truly do not know. Your ignorance may be the only thing that saved you. He deactivated the display. The warp is not empty space. It is a realm of emotion made manifest, where thought becomes reality and reality bends to will. Things live there. Old things, powerful things. They hunger for the material universe, and they corrupt all they touch. Chaos is the name we give to their influence. And those who serve it forfeit their right to exist. The phenomenon that brought me here, that was the warp, yes. And you should be dead insane or transformed into something no longer human. The fact that you are not suggests either unprecedented luck or protection you do not understand. Thorn met his eyes. Your machine's power source. These particles it generates. They shielded you from the warp's touch. Accidentally created a barrier strong enough to preserve your sanity through transit. That makes it valuable. Potentially invaluable. The GN drive is not a weapon against supernatural forces. It is engineering physics, applied science. It functions regardless of intention. Results matter more than philosophy. Thorn moved toward the door, then paused. We deploy in 6 hours. Brother Hadrian will restore your machine to operational status. You will embed with 3rd Squad under Brother Sergeant Kane. Follow orders, engage designated targets, do not fire upon Imperial forces. He looked back over his shoulder. And if you attempt to flee, we will destroy your machine and then destroy you. There is no escape from service once it has begun. The door closed, leaving Setsuna alone with his thoughts and the planet rotating below. 6 hours later, he stood in Exia's cockpit once more. The tech marine had performed miracles. The twisted arm had been straightened, reinforced with Imperial alloys that matched Gundam's specifications closely enough for field repairs. The GN blade remained lost, but the GN sword had been recalibrated and tested. Most importantly, the GN drive hummed with steady power, its output stabilized through methods Hadrian refused to explain, beyond vague references to prayer and sacred oils. The mobile suit felt different. Small modifications throughout changes to interface systems and power distribution. Nothing that compromised core function, but enough to notice. As if the machine had been studied, understood, and subtly altered. Setsuna activated the neural link. Data flowed through his consciousness. Exia's systems read green across the board. Limited ammunition for the GN beam daggers, full charge on the GN sword thrusters at 90% efficiency. Not peak performance, but combat ready. The deployment bay held 5 Thunderhawk gunships. Each craft could carry 30 Space Marines and their equipment, along with light vehicles and support gear. Exia barely fit in the cargo hold of the lead gunship, secured by mag clamps that left scorch marks on the mobile suit's armor. Brother Sergeant Kane approached. His armor bore more battle damage than thorns the ceramite scarred and patched in dozens of places. When he spoke, his voice carried the rasp of someone who had inhaled too much smoke and never quite healed. Mobile suit operator. You will deploy with 3rd Squad. Our objective is the Planetary Governor's Palace Central Capital Region. Resistance expected to be heavy. Your role is fire support and elimination of hard targets. Do not engage in close quarters. Do not advance beyond designated positions. Do not under any circumstances allow your machine to be captured by enemy forces. Understood. I doubt that, but you will learn. Kane mag-locked his helmet and moved to join his squad. 10 warriors in total, each a veteran of campaigns Setsuna could not comprehend. They settled into restraint harnesses without conversation, weapons secured, minds already shifting to combat mode. The Thunderhawk shuddered as it launched from the strike cruiser. Setsuna felt the transition from artificial gravity to atmospheric flight, the buffeting as they hit the outer envelope. Through Exia's cameras, he watched the planet grow larger, details resolving from abstract geography to specific terrain. The capital city sprawled across a river delta, its architecture the same Gothic excess he had seen before, but on a grander scale. Spires reached toward the sky like accusing fingers. Temples dominated every major intersection. Their bells silent now, their doors sealed. And everywhere the 8-pointed star painted on walls, carved into streets, formed from the bodies of those who had died in its creation. The Thunderhawk's pilot voxed coordinates. LZ hot. PDF forces have anti-air batteries active. Evasive pattern Epsilon. All units brace for combat insertion. The world outside exploded with tracer fire. Rounds designed to down aircraft larger than tanks hammered against the gunship's void shields. Setsuna felt the impacts through Exia's frame, each hit registering as vibration through the mag clamps. Then they were through, descending fast, the assault ramp already dropping. Brother Sergeant Kane and his squad unbuckled and moved as one, boots hitting the ramp at full sprint, even as the Thunderhawk hovered 3 meters above ground. Setsuna activated Exia's release sequence. The mag clamps disengaged, and the mobile suit dropped. Thrusters fired, controlling descent, and Exia landed in a crouch that sent cracks through the rockcrete street. Around him, the capital burned. Not with natural fire, but with flames that moved against the wind that burned in colors that hurt to observe directly. Buildings had been transformed, their gothic architecture twisted into new configurations that suggested organic growth. Streets ran with liquid that might have been water but reflected no light. And everywhere the PDF forces. They wore uniforms that had once been standard Imperial issue. Now those uniforms had been modified, festooned with symbols that made Setsuna's eyes water when he tried to focus on them. The soldiers moved with jerky, puppet-like motions, firing weapons with no regard for cover or tactics. Simply advancing, dying, and being replaced by more. Brother Sergeant Kane's voice crackled through the Vox, translated by Exia's systems. "Third squad, advance by fire and maneuver. Cleanse all tainted elements. The Emperor's judgment is at hand." The Space Marines moved forward with terrifying efficiency. Bolter fire tore through PDF troops' mass-reactive rounds, detonating inside torsos and leaving nothing but red mist. Chainswords roared to life, cutting through corrupted soldiers with contemptuous ease. In 30 seconds, Third Squad had cleared the landing zone of all resistance. Setsuna raised the GN sword, feeling the weapon's familiar weight through the neural link. Ahead, PDF forces gathered in the ruins of what had been a temple. Hundreds of them forming into ranks that suggested coordination beyond individual capability. "Mobile suit operator." Kane's voice calm despite the chaos. "Hardened position coordinates marked. Eliminate." The coordinates appeared in Exia's targeting system. Setsuna engaged thrusters, the mobile suit surging forward with acceleration that would have killed an unaugmented human. He covered 50 meters in 2 seconds, the GN sword drawing back for a horizontal slash. The blade cut through the temple's wall like it was paper. Stone metal flesh, all parted before Gundanium alloy, moving at supersonic speeds. The structure collapsed inward, burying the PDF forces beneath tons of sanctified rubble. But as the dust cleared, Setsuna saw movement. Not retreat, not surrender. The survivors crawled from the debris-broken bodies, still trying to advance, fingers digging into stone mouths open in screams that carried no sound. Brother Sergeant Kane put a bolter round through the nearest crawler's skull. Chaos, corruption. They do not feel pain. They do not fear death. They serve powers that reward sacrifice with transformation. He fired again and again. Systematic execution. This is the enemy you now fight. Remember that mercy is wasted on the soulless. Setsuna watched the Space Marines work, watched them kill with mechanical precision, showing no hesitation, no doubt, no mercy. This was what service to the Imperium meant. This was the war he had been conscripted into. He looked down at Exia's hands, the mobile suit's weapons designed to end conflicts through overwhelming intervention. Celestial being had chosen targets, carefully striking to minimize casualties while achieving strategic goals. Here, the only goal seemed to be annihilation. The Vox crackled. All squads advanced to secondary objectives. Resistance is collapsing. The governor's palace is within reach. Third squad moved deeper into the burning capital. Exia followed a white giant walking through ruins painted red, its pilot learning the first lessons of a war that had raged for 10,000 years. The governor's palace had been a monument to imperial authority. Past tense. Setsuna stood in what remained of the grand atrium, Exia's cameras, surveying damage that went beyond conventional warfare. The walls had not been destroyed so much as transformed. Stone had become something else, something that pulsed with rhythms suggesting circulation. The floor tiles arranged themselves in patterns that hurt to track with the eye geometric configurations that seemed to rotate through dimensions vision could not follow. And the bodies. Hundreds of them. PDF soldiers, palace guards, civilian administrators, all arranged in concentric circles around a central pit that descended into darkness. They had died screaming, their final expressions preserved with perfect clarity. Brother Sergeant Kane examined the scene with clinical detachment. His squad had secured the perimeter, establishing firing positions at every entrance. Tech Marine Hadrian worked at a portable cogitator running scans that produced data streams Setsuna's systems could not interpret. Ritual sacrifice? Kane's voice carried no emotion. Classic chaos methodology. The governor likely initiated it himself, offering his people to secure favor from the dark gods. He gestured toward the pit. That goes down at least 3 kilometers. Intersects with the planet's primary mining shafts. Whatever corruption started here spread through the underground networks. Setsuna maneuvered Exia closer, the mobile suit's searchlight cutting into the pit's depths. The light revealed nothing. Not darkness in the absence of illumination, but darkness as substance as presence. It absorbed the beam completely, giving back nothing. We should destroy this place. Setsuna's words emerged before tactical analysis could stop them. Seal the pit collapse, the structure prevent further spread. Premature. Tech Marine Hadrian looked up from his cogitator. I am detecting residual warp energy consistent with recent demonic manifestation. This site serves as an anchor point. Destroying it would simply disperse the taint rather than eliminate it. He approached the pit's edge servo arms, extending scanner equipment into the void. We need to understand the corruption source before we can properly cleanse it. Understanding can wait. Kane checked his bolter's ammunition counter. Command has authorized full planetary purge. Cyclonic torpedoes are being prepared in orbit. In 6 hours, this world burns down to bedrock. Our mission is intelligence gathering before sterilization. 6 hours. Setsuna processed the time frame. An entire planet condemned. Millions of people, most of whom likely had no idea they lived on corrupted ground, sentenced to death by orbital bombardment. The Imperium's solution to problems seemed to default to annihilation. There must be survivors. He kept his tone neutral, stating observation rather than arguing. Resistance cells isolated populations, people who refused corruption. Possibly. Kane shrugged the gesture, carrying surprising humanity despite the armor. The Imperium is vast. We have billions of worlds, millions of soldiers, trillions of citizens. Individual lives hold value only in aggregate. This planet is compromised beyond recovery. Better to destroy it now than risk the taint spreading to neighboring systems. That is genocide. That is necessity. The sergeant turned to face Exia directly. You come from beyond the Imperium. Your ignorance of our reality is understandable. But understand, this chaos does not negotiate, does not compromise, does not leave space for mercy. Every moment we debate is a moment for the corruption to spread. Every life we save might be a vector for demonic possession. His red eye lenses gleamed in the atrium's strange light. Would you risk 1 billion lives to save 1 million? Because that is the calculation we make every day. Setsuna had no answer. Celestial being operated on different principles. Precision intervention. Targeted strikes against military forces, minimizing civilian casualties while achieving strategic objectives. Here, the objectives seem to eliminate distinction between combatant and non-combatant. Tech Marine Hadrian's cogitator chimed. I have located the corruption's focal point. 3.2 kilometers down in what the planetary records indicate was the primary adamantium excavation site. He displayed a hololithic map. The miners broke through into a pre-existing cavity. Initial reports described it as a natural formation. Geological surveys suggested otherwise. What did they find? Kane moved to study the map. Unknown. All personnel in the excavation died within 72 hours of the breach. But the governor's private logs mention whispers, promises, visions of wealth and power beyond imagining. Hadrian's mechanical voice carried something that might have been discussed. Standard chaos corruption. They always promised transformation. They always delivered damnation. The palace shuddered. Not from weapons fire, but from something deeper. A vibration that came through the structure itself, resonating at frequencies that Exia's sensors struggled to categorize. Dust fell from the transformed ceiling. The bodies arranged around the pit shifted slightly, as if moved by invisible hands. Contact! One of Kane's squad members voxed from the perimeter. Movement detected sub-level access tunnels. Multiple signatures. Estimate 60+ hostiles approaching fast. Kane's response came immediate. All units combat stance. Conserve ammunition. Engage at optimal range. To Setsuna, mobile suit operator, you will hold position at the pit's edge. Anything that emerges from below you, eliminate. Do not let them establish position in the atrium. Setsuna positioned Exia accordingly. The GN sword raised and ready. Through the neural link, he felt the mobile suit systems achieve combat readiness. Targeting solutions calculated. Thruster output optimized. The GN drives hum, increase slightly particles, beginning to accumulate around the blade's edge. The first figures emerged from the sub-level tunnels. They had been human once. Perhaps. Now they wore bodies like poorly fitting clothes limbs bent at angles. Anatomy did not support skin stretched tight over frames that had grown too large for their original structure. They carried weapons, autoguns, stubbers, improvised blades, but their advance suggested something beyond tactical thinking. More like animals following scent driven by hunger rather than strategy. The Space Marines opened fire with characteristic precision. Bolter rounds found targets detonating inside corrupted flesh. Chainswords cut through twisted forms, but for every enemy that fell, 2 more emerged from the tunnels. The PDF soldiers had numbered 7,000. Assuming even half had undergone transformation, this was a force that could overwhelm through sheer mass. Setsuna engaged thrusters. Exia moving in a controlled arc around the pit's perimeter. The GN sword swept horizontal cutting through a cluster of corrupted soldiers. The Gundanium blade left trails of green particles, residual GN energy that clung to the wound channels like phosphorescent blood. More emerged. Dozens. Hundreds. They filled the atrium with bodies that refused to acknowledge damage. Setsuna watched one soldier take 3 bolter rounds to the torso organs, pulped, spine severed, yet still dragging itself forward with its arms. They feel nothing. Brother Sergeant Kane's observation carried the weight of experience. Pain, fear, self-preservation, all human responses stripped away. They serve the dark gods now. Only total destruction stops them. The atrium became a killing ground. Space Marines held choke points with disciplined fire. Exia swept the larger clusters, the mobile suit's speed and reach compensating for the sheer numbers. But the tide continued. For every 10 destroyed, 20 more crawled from the depths. Tech Marine Hadrian abandoned his cogitator, drawing a plasma pistol from his belt. Brother Sergeant, the warp energy readings are spiking. Something is coming. something larger than corrupted PDF. The pit responded to his words. Light emerged from below. Not natural illumination, but a glow that seemed to drain warmth from the air that made Setsuna's vision blur at the edges. The bodies arranged around the pit began to move, not with individual will, but as a collective forming themselves into a pattern that made the atrium's geometry shift. Then it rose from the darkness. Setsuna's training had prepared him for many combat scenarios. Mobile suits, conventional forces, even the theoretical engagement protocols against unknown enemies. Nothing had prepared him for this. The entity defied stable description. Its form shifted between states solid liquid energy concepts that had no physical manifestation. One moment it appeared vaguely humanoid, the next more like a mass of reaching tendrils. Colors that existed nowhere in natural spectrum played across its surface. Where it moved, reality cracked like stressed glass. Diamond. Kane's voice remained steady despite what they faced. Greater manifestation, possibly a herald of Zinch. All units fall back to secondary positions. Tech Marine, active your null field generator. Hadrian triggered a device on his armor, and a sphere of stabilized reality expanded outward. Where it touched the demon's form, the entity recoiled, its shifting nature forced into momentarily coherent shape. But the field only extended 10 meters, a small island of sanity in an ocean of corruption. The demon spoke. Or rather, sound emerged that minds interpreted as speech words in languages that had never been human, translated through some mechanism that bypassed normal hearing. Warriors of the corpse god, you bring such wonderful tools, such perfect instruments of change. Its attention focused on Exia. And this is new, this is unknown. The architect of fate did not foresee this arrival. Setsuna activated the GN field, wrapping Exia in a barrier of particle saturation. The shield had stopped beam weapons and kinetic impactors. Against this enemy, he had no data on its effectiveness. But doing nothing meant accepting vulnerability. The demon reached toward the mobile suit appendages that were sometimes tentacles, sometimes claws, sometimes simply abstract concepts of grasping. They struck the GN field and recoiled. Where the particles touched the entity's substance, both energies annihilated each other in bursts of light that registered across every spectrum. Fascinating. The demon's form stabilized slightly, forced into coherence by its interaction with the GN particles. Your technology draws from principles outside the great game. Pure physical law, uncorrupted by the warp's touch. So rare, so valuable. Brother Sergeant Kane fired his bolter. The mass reactive rounds passed through the demon's form, detonating harmlessly in the space where its substance had been a microsecond earlier. Mobile suit operator, withdraw. This enemy requires specialized equipment we do not have on hand. But the demon moved faster. Tentacles lashed out, not toward Exia, but toward the Space Marines. 3 warriors disappeared, pulled into the entity's mass armor, and flesh dissolving into the corruption. Their screams lasted exactly 1 second before ceasing entirely. Setsuna did not think. Training took over. He pushed the GN drive to maximum output, particles flooding the atrium in a wave of emerald light. The concentration was high enough to cause physical effects, wind pressure, temperature spike. And where the particles contacted the demon, they burned. The entity shrieked. Not in pain, perhaps demons felt no pain, but in something like frustration. Its form destabilized, forced to retreat from the GN saturation. It withdrew toward the pit appendages, still reaching, still grasping, but unable to maintain manifestation in the face of the particle storm. You delay the inevitable. Its voice echoed even as its form dissipated. The wound remains open. The gateway stands ready. And when the stars align, what waits below will rise. Your machine, your purity, your defiance, all will be changed. Then it was gone, retreated into the pit, leaving only silence and the bodies of the 3 fallen Space Marines. Brother Sergeant Kane moved to examine his fallen brothers. Touched each one, speaking words in a language Setsuna's translator could not process. A ritual, perhaps. A prayer for the dead. You saved the squad. Kane straightened his tone unchanged despite the loss. The GN particles disrupted the demon's manifestation, forced it back to the warp. That is valuable tactical data. Setsuna powered down Exia's systems, the GN drive cycling back to standby. He felt hollow. 3 men dead. An entity that violated every law of physics he understood. And 6 hours until orbital bombardment reduced all of it to ash. What was it? He asked. What was that thing? A demon. A fragment of the Chaos Gods given form through warp energy and mortal sacrifice. They are rare on the material plane, require specific conditions to manifest. But once present, they are nearly impossible to destroy through conventional means. Kane checked his ammunition. Your machine disrupted it. That suggests the GN particles have properties beyond standard physics. Tech Marine Hadrian will want to study this. After the planet burns, the planet's fate is sealed. But understanding how your technology interacts with warp entities could save countless lives on other worlds. Kane moved toward the exit. We have completed our intelligence gathering. Time to extract before the exterminatus begins. The squad moved out, carrying their fallen brothers with battlefield efficiency. Setsuna followed Exia, stepping carefully through the transformed palace. Behind them, the pit waited in darkness. And somewhere in those depths, the demon prepared for its inevitable return. The Thunderhawk retrieved them from the palace roof. As they ascended toward orbit, Setsuna watched the capital city shrink below. Saw the 8-pointed stars painted on every surface. Saw the corrupted architecture twisting toward an alien sky. Saw a world that had fallen to forces he was only beginning to understand. In 6 hours, it would all be fire. Clean, purifying absolute. He wondered if that made it better or worse. The strike cruiser's Strategium was a chamber designed for planning campaigns across star systems. Setsuna stood at the edge of the hololithic display, watching as orbital scans painted a 3-dimensional model of the planet below. The data stream showed corruption spreading like cancer through the underground mining networks. Red indicators marked warp energy concentrations. Amber warnings flagged unstable reality. Green zones, safe areas, comprised perhaps 12% of the mapped territory and were shrinking by the hour. Chapter Master Hadrian, not to be confused with the tech marine of the same name, studied the display with hands clasped behind his back. He was ancient even by Astarte's standards, his armor bearing campaign markings from battles fought when Setsuna's grandparents had not yet been born. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. The exterminatus is delayed. Sergeant Thorne's head turned sharply. My lord, the corruption continues to spread. Yes, but new intelligence suggests opportunity. The chapter master gestured, and the hololithic display zoomed to focus on the mining cavity where the breach had occurred. Navigator Voss reports warp currents flowing through this region show unusual characteristics. The tear between realms is not naturally occurring. It was opened, and if opened, it can be closed. Tech Marine Hadrian, standing at the Strategium's technical station, brought up additional data. The demon we encountered in the governor's palace confirmed as much. It spoke of a gateway of something waiting below. If we can seal the breach at its source, the demonic manifestations will lose their anchor to reality. The planet might be salvageable. Might. Thorne's skepticism was evident even through Vox distortion. That requires entering the breach itself, fighting through whatever defenses the enemy has established, and accomplishing this before the warp corruption spreads beyond containment. 4 hours. The chapter master pulled up a countdown timer. That is how long Navigator Voss estimates we have, before the breach becomes self-sustaining. After that point, even closing the original tear will not stop the cascade. But within that window, success is achievable. His gaze moved to Setsuna. If we have the right tools. Setsuna understood before the words came. You want Exia to enter the breach. Your machine has demonstrated resistance to warp corruption that our technology cannot match. The GN particles disrupt demonic manifestation force entities back into the Imperium. That makes you uniquely suited for this mission. The chapter master approached, and despite Setsuna's experience facing death, something in those ancient eyes demanded respect. I will not order you. You are auxiliary, not Astartes. But I am asking. Help us close this wound before an entire world burns. The choice was not really a choice. Refuse and millions died. Accept and perhaps save them while risking everything. Celestial beings' mandate had been to intervene in conflicts, to cut through the chaos and restore order. This was intervention at its most fundamental level. What is the mission profile? Tech Marine Hadrian brought up tactical schematics. Fast insertion via Thunderhawk to the mining facility. Descend 3 kilometers through corrupted territory to reach the breach chamber. Third Squad provides escort and fire support. You will carry specialized equipment, a vortex-charged magnesium-based incendiary payload designed to destabilize warp rifts from the material side. Plant it at the breach point. Withdraw before detonation. Time from insertion to detonation. 30 minutes maximum. After that, the warp energy concentration will overwhelm even your machine's protection. 30 minutes. To descend 3 kilometers through hostile territory, plant explosives, and extract. Setsuna had conducted operations on tighter timelines, but never against an enemy that defied physical law. I will do it. Brother Sergeant Kane stepped forward. Third Squad is already prepared. We launch in 20 minutes. The preparation moved with mechanical efficiency. Exia received additional armor plating ablative layers designed to shed warp energy exposure. The vortex charge was secured to the mobile suit's back, mag-locked alongside the GN sword's mounting. Tech Marine Hadrian personally blessed each component speaking litanies in machine code while anointing circuits with sacred oils. Setsuna ran final diagnostics from the cockpit. The GN drive showed steady output, though the particles exhibited unusual behavior near the vortex charge. They seemed to avoid it, as if repelled by whatever energies the weapon contained. He made note of the phenomenon, but did not abort the mission. The Thunderhawk descended through atmosphere that had grown visibly wrong. The purple sky now showed streaks of colors that had no names. Aurora effects that moved against the wind's direction. The 3 moons hung misaligned, their orbits shifted by tidal forces that came from dimensions other than the material. They landed at the mining facility's primary shaft entrance. The structure had been built to last centuries, reinforced against geological shifts and equipment failure. Now those same reinforcements held corrupted architecture together, preventing total collapse, even as the metal twisted into new configurations. Third Squad deployed with weapons ready. Brother Sergeant Kane carried a flamer in addition to his bolter, the weapon modified to burn at temperatures that could melt ceramite. The other 9 warriors bore specialized ammunition, consecrated rounds, sanctified explosives equipment, designed specifically for fighting demonic entities. Setsuna activated Exia's searchlights. The beams cut into the shaft's depths, revealing elevator systems, transformed into organic structures, support beams that pulsed with veins, carrying fluids that were not oil or hydraulic fluid. The descent would be on foot, or rather on mobile suit legs and space marine boots. They moved down. The first kilometer passed in relative silence. The shaft showed signs of hasty evacuation equipment, abandoned mid-operation. Personal effects scattered emergency lighting still flickering from backup power. But no bodies. Whatever had happened to the miners, they had either fled or been taken elsewhere. The second kilometer brought the first resistance. Corrupted PDF soldiers emerged from side tunnels, their transformation more advanced than those encountered in the capital. Some had grown additional limbs sprouting from torsos and backs. Others had fused together multiple bodies, sharing a single nervous system. They attacked with weapons and claws and teeth, a tide of flesh that threw itself against the Space Marines' defensive formation. Exia engaged with the GN sword, cutting through clusters while conserving the beam daggers for harder targets. The mobile suit's speed advantage proved critical in the confined space. Where the Astartes had to maintain formation and firing lanes, Exia could maneuver vertically, using the shaft's walls for purchase. But the numbers kept increasing. Hundreds of corrupted soldiers, perhaps thousands, all funneling up from the depths. Third Squad held their ground through discipline and firepower, but ammunition was finite. Brother Sergeant Kane's flamer ran dry after clearing a particularly dense cluster. 2 warriors switched to chainswords the roaring blades, creating a wall of mechanical teeth. Movement below. One warrior voxed from point position. Large signature, definitely not human scale. The daemon rose from the depths like a nightmare given form. This one was different from the entity encountered in the palace. Where that had been a herald, this registered as something more fundamental. Its body stretched across the shaft's entire diameter, a mass of writhing tentacles and mouths, and eyes that opened and closed in patterns suggesting thought. Where it moved, the very structure of the shaft changed metal, becoming flesh rock, becoming something that screamed when touched. Greater Demon of Nurgle. Tech Marine Hadrian's voice carried unusual tension. Fall back! We cannot engage this in close quarters. But retreat was not an option. The corrupted soldiers pressed from above and behind. The demon blocked the path forward. Third Squad was trapped between 2 impossible forces with nowhere to maneuver. Setsuna made the calculation in microseconds. The GN particles had disrupted the previous demon. This one was larger, more powerful, but the principle should hold. He pushed the GN drive to maximum output, flooding the shaft with emerald light. The demon recoiled, its tentacles withdrawing from the particle saturation. But it did not retreat entirely. Instead, it adapted. Areas of its body began to crystallize, forming barriers that the GN particles could not penetrate. The transformation spread the demon, learning to resist, even as Setsuna maintained the output. It is evolving defenses. Tech Marine Hadrian scanners painted data across the Vox. The warp adapts. What worked once becomes ineffective with repetition. We need a new approach. Brother Sergeant Kane made the decision. Third Squad covering fire on the demon's crystallized sections. Mobile suit operator punch through while it is distracted. We will hold the corrupted forces and follow your exit path. That leaves you surrounded? We are Astartes. We have fought worse odds. Kane's bolter barked rounds, hammering into the demon's crystalline armor. "Move! Complete the mission! The planet depends on it!" Setsuna wanted to argue to find another solution, but the countdown timer showed 18 minutes remaining. Every second of debate was a second lost. He engaged Exia's thrusters at full burn, the mobile suit launching forward like a missile. The GN's sword struck the demon's crystallized armor at supersonic velocity. Gundanium met warp-forged material in a collision that sent shockwaves through the shaft. The armor cracked. Particles forced their way into the fractures, destabilizing the structure from within. Exia's momentum carried it through, smashing a hole large enough for the mobile suit to pass. Behind him, Third Squad's weapons roared in sustained barrage. Brother Sergeant Kane's voice came through the Vox, calm despite the chaos. "Emperor protects. Now go." The third kilometer descended through territory that had ceased to be material reality. The walls no longer showed rock or metal. They displayed scenes from other times, other places. Setsuna saw battles he had never fought, cities he had never visited, people he had never met. His own face appeared in the visions, distorted, transformed, showing futures that might have been, or still could be. He shut down external cameras, relied on internal sensors. The neural link fed him data without visual interpretation. Distance to breach point 400 meters, 300, 200. The shaft opened into a cavern that the mining records had not mentioned. Perhaps it had not existed before the breach. Perhaps it had always been here waiting for discovery. The space defied measurement. Exia's rangefinders returned contradictory data, suggesting the cavern was simultaneously 50 meters across and infinite in scope. At its center, the breach. A tear in reality itself, edges ragged like torn fabric beyond which lay the warp in all its raw chaos. Colors that had no physical existence poured through. Sounds that were not sound, but concepts of sound. And things moved in the depths, vast shapes that suggested intelligence operating on scales beyond human comprehension. Setsuna moved Exia to the breach's edge. Detached the vortex charge from the mobile suit's back. The weapon was simple in concept, a shaped explosive designed to create a localized implosion, forcing the tear closed through brute thermodynamic force. Whether it would work against a warp rift was theoretical, but theory was all they had. He set the timer. 5 minutes. Enough time to reach minimum safe distance if nothing went wrong. Everything went wrong. The demon from the shaft emerged into the cavern, its mass compressing to fit through the opening, then expanding again to fill available space. But it was not alone. Other entities poured through lesser demons, fragments of the greater powers. Manifestations of emotion so strong, they had achieved independent existence. And behind them, all through the breach, something noticed. Setsuna felt its attention like pressure against his mind. An intelligence so vast that human consciousness could not properly register its scale. It looked through the breach, saw him, saw Exia, saw the vortex charge. Understood immediately. The timer showed 4 minutes, 30 seconds. The demons attacked as one. Exia's GN field activated automatically, neural interface, responding to Setsuna's intention faster than conscious thought. Particles formed a barrier that held against the first wave. But there were dozens of entities, hundreds, all pressing against the shield with strength drawn from the warp itself. The field began to fail. Not from single overwhelming force, but from sustained pressure across every surface. Exia's power reserves drained at catastrophic rates. The GN drive cycled beyond safe parameters, particles bleeding off in streams that left trails of light through the corrupted air. 3 minutes. Setsuna drew the GN sword, dropped the failing field and committed to offense. The blade cut through demons with the same efficiency it had shown against physical enemies. But for every entity destroyed, its essence simply dispersed back into the warp reforming seconds later. He was not killing them, merely disrupting their manifestation. And they learned from each contact, adapting their forms to resist the Gundanium edge. 2 minutes. The greater demon reached Exia tentacles, wrapping around the mobile suit's legs, torso, arms. The grip was not merely physical. Setsuna felt it through the neural link, felt the corruption trying to flow through the connection into his mind. Visions of transformation flooded his consciousness. Promises of power, of understanding, of becoming something greater than human. He rejected them all, focused on a single truth that had guided him since the first day in a Gundam's cockpit. He was the pilot. The machine was his tool. Neither corruption nor promise could change that fundamental relationship. 1 minute. Exia's right arm tore free from the demon's grip through sheer thruster force. The GN sword came around in a horizontal arc that severed 3 tentacles and opened a channel toward the shaft entrance. Setsuna pushed the mobile suit forward, sacrificing the left arm to buy distance. Metal screamed as it was torn away, but Exia kept moving. 30 seconds. He activated every thruster, every vernier, every emergency burst system. Exia launched up the shaft like a missile rocketing past corrupted soldiers who could not react fast enough to intercept. The mobile suit's armor ablated from friction, from impacts from the corrupted environment itself, eating away at Gundanium alloy. 10 seconds. The shaft exit appeared ahead. Setsuna could see daylight purple and wrong, but still recognizable as sky. The Thunderhawk weighted assault ramp down, engines hot. 5 seconds. Exia burst from the shaft and immediately went into controlled tumble. The mobile suit had lost too much mass, too much balance. Setsuna fought the spin using remaining thrusters to arrest rotation. 0. The vortex charge detonated 3 kilometers below. The explosion was not fire or force. It was absence. A sphere of nothing expanding from the breach point, consuming everything it touched, rock metal demons, warp energy, all compressed to a single point and then dispersed into quantum foam. The mining shaft collapsed inward, 3 kilometers of corrupted structure, falling into the void left by the charge's detonation. Then silence. Exia landed hard, the mobile suit's remaining leg buckling on impact. Setsuna felt the crash through the neural link, felt systems failing across every board. But the cockpit held. The GN drive maintained integrity. He was alive. The Thunderhawk touched down meters away. Its assault ramp revealed Brother Sergeant Kane and 8 members of 3rd Squad. 2 warriors were missing. They had held the demon long enough for Setsuna to complete the mission, and they had paid for that time with their lives. Tech Marine Hadrian approached Exia's damaged form, scanning equipment already active. The breach is sealed. Warp energy readings are dropping rapidly. The corruption will persist for months, perhaps years, but it will fade. The planet can be saved. Setsuna unsealed the cockpit, climbing down from the battered mobile suit. His body ached from neural feedback, from the strain of maintaining connection through such intense combat. But he had survived. Exia had survived, and the mission was complete. Brother Sergeant Kane removed his helmet, revealing features creased with exhaustion that went beyond the physical. You honored my brother's sacrifice. They bought time with their lives, and you used that time well. He clasped Setsuna's shoulder with surprising gentleness. The Imperium is vast and cruel, but sometimes we save worlds. Remember that when the darkness seems absolute. Overhead, the purple sky began to clear. The 3 moons resumed their proper orbits. And somewhere in the depths, sealed behind 3 kilometers of collapsed rock and collapsed reality, the breach closed like a wound, finally beginning to heal. Exia stood in the strike cruiser's repair bay, half disassembled. Setsuna watched from the observation platform as servitors worked under Tech Marine Hadrian's direction. The creatures moved with mechanical precision, their organic components reduced to basic function, while augmetic replacements handled the specialized labor. They removed scorched armor plating, extracted damaged actuators, cataloged every component for replacement or repair. The mobile suit had lost its left arm completely. The right showed structural fractures throughout the Gundanium frame. Both legs required replacement knee joints. The GN sword's edge had dulled from cutting through demonic flesh, the molecular alignment disrupted by contact with warp-corrupted material. And the GN drive itself, while still functional, exhibited output fluctuations that suggested damage on levels Tech Marine Hadrian's equipment could not properly assess. 6 weeks minimum. Hadrian stood beside Setsuna, his mechanical appendages folded against his armor in rest configuration. That is the estimate for full restoration. We lack proper materials for some components. Gundanium cannot be synthesized with our forges. We will substitute Imperial alloys where necessary, but performance will degrade. 6 weeks is acceptable. Setsuna kept his tone neutral, though the time frame stung. 6 weeks without Exia meant 6 weeks vulnerable, dependent entirely on the consecrator's goodwill. What about the neural interface? Intact, surprisingly. The warp corruption you encountered should have compromised the connection, used it as a vector to your mind. The fact that it did not suggests the GN particles extend protection to the pilot through the link itself. Hadrian pulled up a hololithic schematic. I have a proposal. We integrate additional shielding into the cockpit systems, psychic dampeners, null field generators equipment designed to resist warp influence. It would add mass-reduce some performance metrics, but it would make you significantly more resistant to chaos corruption. Setsuna studied the schematics. The additions were crude compared to Exia's original engineering, but the logic was sound. He had felt the demon's attention pressing against his consciousness during the breach sealing. Without the GN particle's accidental protection, that pressure might have succeeded. Better to add deliberate safeguards than rely on fortunate side effects. Integrate the modifications. Acknowledged. Hadrian transmitted orders to the servitors, their work patterns shifting immediately to accommodate the new parameters. There is another matter. The chapter master wishes to speak with you. He is in the librarium. The librarium occupied the strike cruiser's upper decks, a space dedicated to records and knowledge rather than weapons or engines. Setsuna had not visited it before. When he entered, he found himself surrounded by data slates, ancient books bound in materials he could not identify, hololithic archives stretching back millennia. And among them, Chapter Master Hadrian, reading from a tome that looked older than human spaceflight. The chapter master looked up as Setsuna approached. The history of the consecrators. 3,700 years of continuous service to the Emperor. Every battle, every campaign, every brother who fell in his name. All recorded here. He closed the tome with surprising gentleness. We remember. That is our burden and our purpose. To remember when others forget. Why tell me this? Because you have earned the right to understand who you fight alongside. The chapter master gestured to a seat. Setsuna took it, noting that the furniture was scaled for baseline humans rather than Astartes. A deliberate choice, perhaps, to make this conversation feel less like a military briefing. You sealed the breach, saved a world from exterminatus. Lost 2 of my brothers in the process, but their sacrifice achieved meaningful results. 3rd Squad speaks well of your conduct under fire. I did what was necessary. Yes, but necessity takes many forms. You could have fled when the demons surrounded you, could have abandoned the vortex charge and prioritized your own survival. Instead, you completed the mission at significant personal risk. The chapter master's ancient eyes studied him. That suggests character. And character is what I need for what comes next. Setsuna waited. Learned to recognize when someone was building toward a difficult request. Navigator Voss has been studying the warp currents in this sector, attempting to understand how you arrived here, what forces pulled your machine through the Imperium. His findings are troubling. The chapter master activated a hololithic display. It showed the local region of space warp routes marked in flowing colors. And in the center, a nexus point where multiple currents converged. There is a stable pathway, a route through the warp that connects this location to somewhere distant. Somewhere Voss cannot clearly identify, but the signature suggests it lies outside known space. Outside the Imperium. Outside the galaxy itself. The chapter master zoomed the display showing the Milky Way as a luminous spiral. The pathway leads elsewhere, possibly to wherever you originated, possibly to something entirely different. But it exists, and it is stable enough for transit, with proper Geller field protection. Setsuna felt his pulse quicken. A way home. A route back to Earth, to celestial being, to the world he had sworn to protect. The possibility seemed impossible after falling through the warp, after everything he had seen and fought. Yet the chapter master would not present false hope. You are offering passage, Shunt.
Massims.
I am offering a choice. The chapter master deactivated the display. You can take that pathway, return to wherever you came from. We will provide a ship and navigator supplies for the journey. You have earned that much through your service, or... He paused. You can stay. Serve as auxiliary with the consecrators. Use your machine and your skills against the enemies of mankind. The Imperium is vast, and the war never ends. We always need capable warriors. The choice should have been simple. Earth needed him. Celestial Being's mission continued. Locke and Alleluia Tieria, all his comrades fought without knowing what had happened to him. Returning meant resuming his purpose, his identity as Gundam Meister. But staying meant something too. Meant fighting against forces that threatened not just political stability, but the fundamental nature of reality. The Imperium was cruel, authoritarian, brutally efficient in ways that violated everything Celestial Being stood for. Yet it also protected trillions of humans from horrors most could not imagine. The chaos entities he had faced would consume Earth without hesitation if given the opportunity. How long do I have to decide? Until your machine is repaired. 6 weeks, as Tech Marine Hadrian indicated. Use that time to observe, to learn to understand what service to the Imperium truly means. Then choose. The chapter master stood the conversation clearly concluded. Either choice will be honored. You are not a prisoner. You are an ally who has proven his worth. Setsuna left the librarium with his thoughts in turmoil. The next 6 weeks passed in a rhythm of observation and contemplation. He watched 3rd Squad train in the strike cruiser's combat deck, watched them run through exercises designed to hone skills already perfected over decades of warfare. Brother Sergeant Kane sparred with his warriors, using powered-down chainswords, the blades still dangerous enough to kill unaugmented humans, but safe enough for practice. The sergeant moved with economy of motion, never wasting energy, every strike calculated for maximum effect. After one session, Kane approached where Setsuna observed from the gallery. "You fought well in the breach. Better than most auxiliaries I have served with. But you hesitate. I was completing the mission, not in combat, in purpose." Kane removed his helmet, revealing the scars that crossed his face like a road map of violence survived. "You question whether the Imperium is worth serving, whether our methods justify the results. I see it in how you watch us, the same way I watch new recruits trying to reconcile training with reality. Your methods are brutal. You kill without hesitation. Accept civilian casualties as inevitable. Treat entire populations as expendable." Yes, but Kane's agreement came without defensiveness, because the alternative is worse. You have seen the warp, witnessed what chaos does to those it touches. Every moment of mercy toward the corrupted is a moment for the taint to spread. Every civilian we save today might be the cultist who opens tomorrow's breach. We are brutal because the enemy does not permit gentleness. There must be another way. If you find one, I will listen. Until then, I use the methods that have kept humanity alive for 10,000 years. Kane replaced his helmet. The Imperium is not good, but it is necessary. Remember that distinction when you make your choice. Setsuna also spent time with Tech Marine Hadrian in the repair bay, watching Exia slowly return to combat capability. The servitors worked with tireless efficiency, but Hadrian personally oversaw every critical component. When he installed the psychic dampeners, he took 3 days to calibrate them, properly running tests that left him visibly fatigued. "Why take such care?" Setsuna asked during one calibration session. "I am auxiliary, not Astartes. My machine is not sacred to the Omnicia." "Your machine survived warp transit, sealed a breach, protected you from demonic corruption. Those facts make it worthy of respect regardless of origin." Hadrian adjusted a power coupling with surprising delicacy for someone with mechanical arms. The Adeptus Mechanicus teaches that all technology carries the Omnissiah's blessing. But blessing takes many forms. Your GN drive operates on principles I cannot fully understand, yet it functions with reliability our plasma reactors cannot match. That suggests truth in the design, and truth is always worth preserving. Even when it contradicts your doctrine. Especially then. Doctrine that cannot adapt to new truths becomes dogma. Dogma leads to stagnation. Stagnation leads to death. Hadrian looked up from his work. The Imperium is old, ancient beyond easy measure. Sometimes I wonder if we remember why we do things, or if we simply do them because we always have. Your machine reminds me that innovation once existed, that humans created new things rather than maintaining old ones. The weeks progressed. Exia took shape. The replacement left arm was bulkier than the original, made from Imperial alloys that approximated Gundanium's properties without matching them perfectly. The new knee joints moved with fractional lag servos, not quite synchronized with the neural interface. The GN sword received a new edge reforged by Hadrian, using techniques that combined metallurgy with ritual. It would never match the original's molecular perfection, but it would cut. And throughout the repair process, Setsuna wrestled with his choice. Return meant abandoning these warriors to fight alone, meant leaving the Imperium one weapon less in its eternal war. but it also meant resuming his true purpose. Celestial being needed Gundam Meisters. Earth needed protection from its own conflicts, the petty wars that humans waged against each other. Stay meant fighting an enemy far worse than political violence. Chaos did not seek territory or resources. It sought corruption, transformation, the fundamental destruction of everything humans were. Fighting it meant serving the Imperium despite its cruelty. Meant accepting that sometimes brutality was the only response to existential threat. On the 40th day, Sergeant Thorne found Setsuna in the observation gallery. The planet below had been declared conditionally safe. PDF survivors were being processed, tested for corruption, executed if taint was found. Civilian populations were being relocated away from the sealed breach site. The Imperium's machinery of control ground forward with inexorable momentum. You are troubled? Thorne's observation came without preamble. I am deciding. Between home and duty, a difficult choice. Thorne stood beside him, watching the planet rotate. I will tell you something few outside the Astartes know. We remember our previous lives. The boys we were before the transformation. I was born on a hive world much like this one. Grew up in the Undercity fighting gangs for food. The chapter recruited me at age 12. Took me from everything I knew and made me into something else. Do you regret it? Every day and never. Thorne's voice carried complexity that surprised Setsuna. I lost my humanity, but I gained purpose. The boy I was died in the transformation. The warrior I became served something greater than individual desire. Is that trade worthwhile? I cannot answer definitively. But I can tell you that 37 years of service have saved millions of lives. The boy would never have achieved that. You are saying I should stay. I am saying both choices have merit. Home offers comfort, familiarity, return to your original purpose. Service offers meaning, impact, the chance to fight an enemy that threatens everything. Neither is wrong, but only one is you. Setsuna looked at the sergeant. What do you mean? You call yourself Gundam. Not a pilot of Gundam, but the thing itself. I have watched you these 6 weeks. Watched how you move, how you think, how you exist when not in combat. You are most alive when fighting. When cutting through obstacles toward a clear objective. That is who you are. Not the destination, but the blade in motion. Thorne turned to face him directly. So ask yourself, where can you cut the deepest? Where can you make the difference that matters? Answer that, and the choice becomes clear. The sergeant left. Setsuna remained watching the planet below and thinking about blades and purposes and the difference between going home and going forward. On the 42nd day, Exia stood complete. Not restored to original specification, but combat capable. The mobile suit bore its damage like scars, patched armor replacement components, modifications that changed its silhouette. But it stood, and standing was enough. Setsuna climbed into the cockpit, activated the neural link, felt the familiar rush of connection as his consciousness merged with the machine systems. The interface responded smoother than expected, despite the repairs. Tech Marine Hadrian had done exceptional work. He ran through a full systems check, weapons operational, thrusters 94% efficiency, GN drive stable output, psychic dampeners active and holding. The mobile suit was ready for combat, ready for whatever came next. The question was where that combat would occur. Setsuna sat in Exia's cockpit, surrounded by instrumentation and displays, and made his choice. Not through logic or obligation, but through understanding of what he was. Not just who, but what. A weapon aimed at injustice. A blade cutting toward resolution. Gundam in purpose as much as name. He knew where he needed to be. The chapter master received him in the strategium. You have decided. Yes. Setsuna stood at attention, meeting those ancient eyes without flinching. I will stay. Serve as auxiliary with the consecrators. Use Exia against the enemies of mankind. You are certain the pathway home remains available. This choice, once made, may be permanent. Warp routes shift. What exists today might close tomorrow. I am certain. Earth has other Gundam Meisters, other pilots to continue Celestial Being's mission. Here I am, the only one who can do what needs to be done. That makes this the right place. The chapter master nodded slowly. Then you are no longer auxiliary. You are battle brother. In spirit, if not flesh. Welcome to the eternal war, Setsuna F. Seiei. May your blade never dull and your purpose never waver. Outside the strategium, Exia waited in the deployment bay. Damaged, modified, imperfect, but ready. Always ready. Because that was what it meant to be Gundam. Not perfection, but perpetual readiness. Not victory, but the will to keep fighting. Setsuna looked at his mobile suit and saw the path forward with absolute clarity. The Imperium needed weapons against chaos. He would be that weapon. Would cut through corruption wherever it arose. Would seal breaches and destroy demons and protect the humans who could not protect themselves. Not because the Imperium was good, but because the alternative was unconscionable. The choice was made. The war continued, and Gundam stood ready to intervene. 3 years passed. Setsuna F. Seiei had fought in 16 campaigns, across 8 sectors. He had closed warp rifts on forge worlds where reality bent around corrupted machinery. Destroyed demon princes that commanded legions of the lost and damned. Intervened in planetary rebellions where entire populations had turned to chaos worship. Each battle left new marks on Exia's frame scars that Tech Marine Hadrian repaired but never fully erased. The mobile suit had evolved. No longer the pristine white machine that had fallen through the warp, but a hybrid of technologies. Gundanium alloy reinforced with blessed adamantium. GN particles channeled through psychically attuned conduits. The GN sword reforged 3 times each iteration, incorporating lessons learned from cutting through entities that defied material existence. Imperial and human innovation merged into something neither culture could have created alone. And now, the final mission. The strike cruiser held position at the edge of the Ghoul Stars, that region of space, where even the Imperium's maps grew uncertain. Navigator Voss had tracked warp current anomalies for months, following patterns that suggested something vast moving in the immaterium. Something that showed all the signatures of a chaos incursion on scale unseen in this sector for centuries. Chapter Master Hadrian stood in the strategium, older now by 3 years, but still carrying the weight of command with steady shoulders. Around him, the assembled leadership of 5th Company studied hololithic displays that showed a space hulk emerging from the warp. Not drifting, but moving with purpose, its trajectory aimed at the populated worlds of the Damocles Gulf. The hulk is 12 kilometers long, comprised of perhaps 30 vessels, all fused together through warp exposure. Augury detects massive warp energy signatures throughout the structure. And at its center, The chapter master gestured, and the display focused on a tear in reality, visible even from external cameras. Another breach, larger than anything we have encountered, stable enough to permit continuous demon manifestation. Sergeant Thorne, promoted to 3rd Company Captain after the previous captain fell in combat, studied the tactical data. Conventional assault would require full chapter strength. Even then, success is uncertain. The Hulk's interior is a maze of corrupted vessels, perfect terrain for demon ambush. Which is why we are not attempting conventional assault. The chapter master looked toward where Setsuna stood in full pilot suit, ready for deployment. 3 years ago, you sealed a breach through precision strike. Penetrated to the source, deployed a vortex charge extracted before detonation. This mission follows the same pattern, but the scale is different. Suntech Marine Hadrian brought up internal schematics of the Space Hulk maps, pieced together from augury scans and ancient records of the vessels that comprised its mass. The breach point is at the core, approximately 6 kilometers from any viable entry. You will need to fight through demon-infested corridors, avoid structural collapse, and plant a modified vortex charge with enough yield to destabilize the entire rift. He paused. The charge will take 5 minutes to arm. Detonation radius is 3 kilometers. You will have approximately 90 seconds to reach minimum safe distance. 90 seconds to cover 3 kilometers. Setsuna ran the calculations. Exia's thrusters at maximum burn could achieve it, but only in open space. Inside a Space Hulk's twisted corridors with demons actively interfering, the odds drop significantly. What is the probability of successful extraction? 7%. The chapter master's honesty was brutal. This is a suicide mission in all but name. We are asking you to sacrifice yourself to save billions. I will not order it. You have earned the right to refuse. Setsuna looked at the hololithic display, saw the Space Hulk drifting toward populated space, imagined what would happen when it arrived. Demons pouring through the breach by the thousands, worlds falling to corruption. The Imperium forced to implement exterminatus on a sector-wide scale. Billions dead regardless, but through fire rather than demonic transformation. 7% was better than 0. I will do it. I expected nothing less. The chapter master moved to stand directly before him. You have served with honor these 3 years, fought beside my brothers as one of them. Whatever happens in that Hulk, know that the consecrators will remember. Your name will be inscribed in our records. Your deeds will be spoken when we honor the fallen. Captain Thorne approached, carrying something wrapped in consecrated cloth. This is yours, earned through blood and service. He unwrapped the object, revealing a combat knife forged from the same blessed adamantium used in Exia's repairs. The blade was inscribed with litanies and high Gothic prayers that would offer protection against warp corruption. May it serve you as well as you have served us. Setsuna took the knife, felt its balance, the craftsmanship evident in every line. It was not a weapon from his world, but it was a weapon he understood, a blade to cut through obstacles. Gundam's purpose distilled to its fundamental essence. The deployment proceeded with mechanical efficiency. Exia launched from the strike cruiser in a boarding torpedo, a single-use delivery system designed to punch through Space Hulk armor and deposit its payload directly into the corrupted interior. The mobile suit fit inside the torpedo's bay, with centimeters to spare, secured by mag clamps that would release on impact. Impact came like a thunderclap. The torpedo struck the Space Hulk's outer hull, penetrated through 3 layers of corrupted metal, and detonated its breaching charges. Exia released from the clamps and stepped into chaos. The interior was worse than any battlefield Setsuna had encountered. Corridors twisted through impossible geometries, walls pulsed with organic growth. The air itself seemed alive, thick with warp energy that made Exia's sensors scream warnings. And everywhere the demons waited. They came in waves. Lesser entities, fragments of the dark god's power, given just enough cohesion to manifest teeth and claws. Exia cut through them with a GN sword, emerald light carving paths through corrupted flesh. The psychic dampeners worked as designed, keeping the demon's mental attacks at bay. But there were so many. The mobile suit advanced through the Space Hulk's depths, following Tech Marine Hadrian's mapped route toward the breach core. Every 100 meters brought new resistance. Corrupted ship systems that had fused into demon-machine hybrids. Swarms of smaller entities that threw themselves at Exia's legs, trying to drag the mobile suit down through sheer mass. Greater demons that required the full power of the GN drive to disrupt. Setsuna fought with precision learned over 3 years of constant combat. No wasted movement, no hesitation, just the steady advance of a blade cutting toward its target. He was Gundam. Obstacles existed to be removed. Distance existed to be crossed. The mission was all that mattered. 3 kilometers in Exia's left leg took critical damage. A demon's claws, empowered by the concentrated warp energy, punched through the blessed adamantium reinforcement and severed the main actuator. The mobile suit stumbled, caught itself against a corridor wall. Setsuna rerouted power from the damaged leg to the thrusters, compensating for the mobility loss. 4 kilometers. The GN sword's edge had dulled from constant use. Setsuna switched to the beam daggers, their particle blades less affected by material degradation. The daggers cut with the same efficiency, but they drained the GN drive faster. Power reserves began dropping toward critical thresholds. 5 kilometers. The corridor ahead collapsed, blocked by debris that would take precious minutes to clear. Setsuna activated Exia's remaining thrusters at full burn, launching the mobile suit through a side passage that the maps indicated was structurally unsound. The passage held long enough for Exia to traverse it, then collapsed behind, cutting off pursuit, but also eliminating the planned extraction route. 6 kilometers. The breach chamber. It was vast beyond reason, a space that should not have fit inside the Hulk's dimensions, but existed nonetheless. The breach itself dominated the center, a tear, perhaps a kilometer across, showing the raw warp beyond. Things moved in those depths. Vast shapes that dwarfed even the greater demons Setsuna had fought. They pressed against the breach's edges, trying to force their way through into material reality. And standing before the breach, a figure waited. It wore armor that might have been Space Marine plate once before corruption transformed it into something else. Symbols of the dark gods covered every surface. The warrior stood 3 meters tall, its frame enhanced beyond even Astartes modification. When it spoke, its voice carried the weight of centuries spent in service to chaos. The Gundam. The blade that cuts without faith. The weapon that serves the corpse emperor while rejecting his divinity. The Chaos Marine drew a sword that wept blood. I am Morthak's chosen of the blood god. I have fought your kind before. Space Marines who believed their purity made them invincible. They all fell. You will be no different. Setsuna did not respond with words. He activated the vortex charge's timer. 5 minutes. Then he raised the GN sword and engaged. The duel was unlike any combat he had experienced. Morthax moved with speed that should have been impossible for something so massive. His corrupted blade met the GN sword with impacts that sent shockwaves through Exia's frame. Each strike was calculated to exploit weaknesses, target damaged components, break through defenses. But Setsuna had 3 years of experience fighting enemies that defied conventional tactics. He used Exia's remaining mobility to create angles forced Morthax to overextend, punished every committed strike with immediate counterattack. The GN sword and the corrupted blade clashed again and again, neither able to achieve decisive advantage. 4 minutes. Morthax changed tactics. Instead of engaging directly, he channeled warp energy through his blade, launching projectiles of condensed corruption. Exia's psychic dampeners absorbed the first volley, but the second overwhelmed the safeguards. Setsuna felt the impact through the neural link, felt the corruption trying to force its way into his consciousness. He rejected it through sheer discipline. 3 years of fighting chaos had taught him how to maintain mental barriers, even under direct assault. The corruption broke against his will, like waves against stone. 3 minutes. Exia's right arm suffered critical damage, the replacement limb's inferior alloys failing under sustained combat stress. The GN sword fell from nerveless fingers. Setsuna immediately drew the beam daggers, engaging with close quarters techniques that turned Exia's damaged state into a weapon. Where conventional tactics required 2 functioning arms, he fought with 1 arm and calculated thruster bursts. 2 minutes. Morthax's blade found a gap in Exia's armor, punched through into the cockpit space. The weapon stopped centimeters from Setsuna's chest, held back only by the last layer of Gundanium plating. The Chaos Marine pulled the blade back for another strike. Setsuna activated every remaining thruster simultaneously. Exia launched forward, crashing into Morthax, with the mobile suit's full mass behind the impact. Both combatants went down in a tangle of metal and corrupted flesh. The beam dagger in Setsuna's remaining hand found the gap where Morthax's helmet met his chest plate, drove through and fired. The Chaos Marine died, his body disintegrating as the warp energies that sustained it dispersed. 1 minute. Setsuna pulled Exia upright. The mobile suit could barely stand, multiple systems offline, structural integrity at critical levels. But it could still move, still fight, still complete the mission. He looked at the Vortex Charges timer. 58 seconds. The extraction route was blocked. The corridors behind him had collapsed. There was no path to minimum safe distance. 7% probability of survival. He had known from the beginning. Setsuna activated the communications array, burning the last of Exia's power to punch a signal through the Space Hulk's interference. This is Setsuna F. Seiei to Consecrator's 5th Company. The charge is armed. Breach will be sealed. Mission accomplished. Captain Thorne's voice came through, distorted but recognizable. Confirmed, battle brother. The Emperor protects. We will remember. 40 seconds. Setsuna unsealed the cockpit. Stood on Exia's shoulder, looking down at the mobile suit that had carried him through 3 years of impossible battles. The machine was broken, battered beyond any repair Tech Marine Hadrian could provide. But it had stood, had fought, had cut through every obstacle placed before it. Gundam's purpose fulfilled to the absolute end. 30 seconds. He drew the combat knife Captain Thorne had given him. Felt its weight one final time. Then he looked toward the breach, toward the entities pressing against reality's edge, and understood what his final action must be. 20 seconds. The neural link was severed, but he had piloted Exia long enough to move it through muscle memory. He activated the manual override, forcing the mobile suit forward on its single functioning leg and maximum thruster burn. Exia limped toward the breach, toward the impossible tear between dimensions, and 10 seconds. The entities beyond sensed his approach. reached for him with appendages that existed in dimensions human perception could not process. But they could not cross the threshold. Not yet. Not while reality still held. 5 seconds. Setsuna stood on Exia's shoulder as the mobile suit reached the breach's edge. He raised the combat knife in final salute to the warriors who had fought beside him. To Thorn, who had taught him necessity. To Hadrian, who had preserved his machine. To the chapter master who had given him purpose. 0. The vortex charge detonated. Reality compressed. The breach collapsed inward, drawing everything near it into a singularity that existed for exactly 1 microsecond before dispersing into quantum foam. The space hulk tore itself apart, its corrupted mass, unable to withstand the violent restructuring of local space-time. And at the epicenter, Exia and its pilot ceased to exist in any conventional sense. Matter-energy consciousness, all compressed to a single point and then released. Not destroyed, but transformed. Scattered across dimensions in patterns that might someday reconverge, but would never again be what they were. The consecrators watched from the strike cruiser as the space hulk collapsed. Watched as the breach sealed the warp energies dispersing like smoke and wind. Watched as the threat to billions vanished in fire and physics. Captain Thorne stood in the observation gallery, his scarred face showing no expression. But when he spoke, his voice carried weight that went beyond words. He was Gundam, and Gundam never yields. Tech Marine Hadrian recorded the data, tactical analysis, energy signatures, the precise mechanisms by which the breach had sealed, all preserved for future reference for the next time someone needed to close a wound in reality. Among the technical details, he included a note in his personal log. Setsuna F. Seye served with distinction. His sacrifice saved billions. The Omniscia recognizes all who seek truth through action. Chapter Master Hadrian returned to the librarium, opened the great tome of the consecrator's history. And in careful script, he wrote, Year 99, 41 plus 3 years 2 months. Brother Setsuna F. Seye, battle brother in spirit, gave his life to seal the Ghoul Star's breach. He arrived through the warp, an impossibility made manifest. He fought beside us, blade against darkness. He chose service over safety, duty over return. He was not Astartes, but he embodied the best of what we aspire to be. Let his name be remembered when we speak of those who stood against the dying of the light. The words would join thousands of others, tens of thousands. The record of an eternal war that consumed heroes like fuel. But they would endure, and in that endurance, Setsuna F. Seye would live forever in the Imperium's memory. Somewhere in the void, particles that had once comprised a mobile suit and its pilot drifted through dimensions humanity had no names for. Perhaps they would dissipate entirely, scattered beyond any hope of reconvergence. Perhaps they would find their way to somewhere new, some place where a warrior and his machine might begin again. Or perhaps they simply became part of the fundamental fabric of reality itself. Consciousness dissolved, but purpose preserved. A blade without form, cutting through corruption wherever it arose. Gundam in concept, rather than material intervening eternally in the space between order and chaos. The Imperium did not deal in perhaps, only in results. And the result was billions saved, a sector preserved, a wound closed that would not reopen. In the years that followed, warriors fighting against chaos corruption in the Ghoul Stars region reported strange phenomena. Emerald light appearing at critical moments, demons driven back by forces that registered as pure physical law rather than psychic power. breaches that sealed themselves without conventional intervention. The Adeptus Mechanicus studied the reports, but could not explain them through existing frameworks. The Space Marines who witnessed the phenomena did not seek explanation. They simply called it the blade that closed the wound, and they fought harder, knowing that somewhere in some form the intervention continued. Setsuna F. Seiye had chosen to become a weapon against injustice. In the end, that choice had been fulfilled more completely than any mortal could have imagined. Not death, but transformation. Not ending, but evolution into something that served the same purpose without the limitations of physical form. He had been Gundam. And Gundam, once committed to cutting through the darkness, could never truly cease. The blade might change hands, might change shape, might even change dimensions. But the edge remained sharp. The purpose remained clear. And somewhere in the infinite war between material and immaterial order and chaos, survival and corruption, that edge continued to cut forever.